All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Hayward Fire Administration up here at Hayward City Hall. Thank you for taking the time to join us and learn about fire safety, and especially kind of defensible space is our main topic for the night. Since this is the Zoom format, we're going to go ahead and allow for questions, the question and answer feature to be turned on. And at any time throughout the evening, if you have a question, you can go ahead and use that question and answer feature, and we'll do our best to get to your questions throughout the evening. If you happen to be calling in on a cell phone and you want to raise your hand, you can use the *9 feature. And then if we can go ahead and if we announce the last 3 digits of your phone number, then you can push *6 and that will unmute your phone so that you can go ahead and ask your question. If we do not get to all of your questions tonight, don't worry, we will be able to get your questions answered via our website. And in order to do that, we're going to go ahead and keep track of the questions that come in on the Q&A. And we will print those up on the website. And if you have further questions, you can ask those too if they come up afterwards. The website that you will go to for that is firesafehfd at hayward-ca.gov. And with that, I want to say thank you again for joining us, and we'll go ahead and get started. And then Shanley, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. It's a good aerial shot of some of the areas that we are going to be talking about today. And we'll go to the next slide. So we have been awarded a FEMA grant this year, and that's what we're working on right now. And what that is going to include is a number of different things. One of it is an education piece, which is what we're doing now, and with the other 3 nights that we're going to be doing classes or discussions. And then we're going to be talking basically about preventing wildfire in the Hayward Hills, understanding wildfire behavior, what is defensible space, and what is the wildland-urban interface. That's part of the education piece. And then as far as defensible space, we're going to be doing 2 things. We would call it a demonstration project, but it's also a project where we've actually done some work and will do some demonstration or do some fuel management. And we've picked a really good site this year to do this work, and we're going to be getting started on that fairly soon. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. We're going to talk about fuel reduction examples and community priorities and some recommendations. And then with that, I'm going to let you know, since I neglected to do so, my name is Eric Balmer. I'm a deputy chief with the Hayward Fire Department, and I currently, one of my assignments is to work with fire prevention issues. And I'm going to introduce Captain Don Nicholson here, and he's going to take over for the next couple slides.
All right, good evening, everybody. Next slide, please. So fire prevention goals, what those are, the reason why we exist as a fire department is to do 3 things, basically. That is the preservation of life, that would include people, pets, livestock, anything that's living, basically. And I'll get to that in the next, not the property, but the resources topic as well. The next thing we want to protect is property, obviously, homes and local businesses, And then the third thing that we protect are the resources. That would include the habitat, wildlife, and that sort of thing. So, when we have a wildfire and it's running up the hill and there's nothing there except for grass, you might ask yourself, why don't they just let that burn and catch it on top of the hill, which sometimes we will. But the goal there is to prevent the destruction of wildlife and the resources. So, and then the other thing is also so that we do not hinder our escape routes, which we'll be talking in another discussion. I think that's the third presentation or workshop that we're going to be doing. So we'll cover that at a later time. Next slide. So we're going to go over a little bit of fire science, okay? So this is something that as firefighters we kind of learn in Fire Science 101, the fire triangles. So basically, if you have one triangle, which is fuel, oxygen, and heat, you take away one of those components, the fire goes out. So like if you use a fire extinguisher, for example, what those are designed to do is either to remove the oxygen or lower the heat so that the fuel is no longer on fire. Okay, so going into wildland firefighting, things that affect the behavior, we have another triangle. So we have fuel, weather, and topography. So fuels can be basically anything that can burn. All right, so grass, trees, houses, anything that's combustible. Okay, and then we have weather, and then there's different aspects of weather that can influence fire's behavior. One of those things you might be aware of is relative humidity. We get those red flag days when we have a combination of things that are combining to cause severe fire weather. So that would be relative humidity. When that drops, the fuels are much drier, easier to burn. Okay, so the other thing is wind. Obviously, wind can push a fire. It can push a fire downhill even. So, and then the third thing is air temperature. So, if it's 105 degrees outside and there's a fire that starts, that's obviously going to affect the nature of the fire and how fast it moves. Okay, next slide. So we'll go over fuel characteristics. Okay, so grasses are considered 1 hour fuels and usually are the primary carrier for fire. So we have 4 categories. The 1 hour fuel, like I just said, the grasses, that can be up to a 1/4 inch in diameter. And, for an example, grasses, leaves, mulch and litter, that kind of stuff that we're talking about. And the reason why we have the hour in there, you might, ask yourself, well, what does that hour have to do with it? That's basically that the fuel moisture can change within an hour because it's a smaller piece of combustible material. Okay, so you can guess that the 10-hour fuel is going to take about 10 hours for that fuel moisture to change, and so on. Okay, so the 10-hour fuels, those are categorized as a 1/4 inch to 1 inch in diameter. Going back to the 1 hour fuel, you can see the lattice in the slide there. Things to consider outside of just natural, things like branches and grasses and things like that. So, things around your house as well. The 10-hour fuel, same thing there, building material. You see the deck there and, the smaller slats there would be considered a 10-hour fuel. The 1 hour fuel, we're getting, into bigger sizes here. That obviously is the fuel moisture takes, about 100 hours to change in these fuels. So, and then we get, those are between 1 and 3 inches. And then we get to the heavier 1,000-hour fuels. Those are, tree trunks, building material, large timbers, and things like that. So in order for the fuel moisture to change there, that's hard to say, we're looking at 1,000 hours there. So basically, you know, I could relate it to starting a campfire. Usually you start at, you know, the smaller, you grab some pine needles and some, you know, twigs and branches and, you know, work your way up to logs. So the logs actually burn hotter, and then the smaller fuels, you know, don't burn as hot, but they burn faster, if that makes sense. Okay, you can go to the next slide. These are the fire types. We basically have 4 types of fire, wildfire behavior. So ground fire, that could be, you know, a stump fire, some, you know, the roots burning, and those are usually kind of a pain to put out because it takes a lot of water and they absorb a lot of energy there. So, you know, kind of oh, you went one slide too far. So they could cause, you know, the next step, which would be a surface fire. Those are your grass fires and low shrubs, and they burn, you know, probably the fastest of all, except for a crown fire, which, you know, kind of burns out of control, which is the next step in the process there. If the crown catches on fire, then that could cause embers to, you know, launch, you know, up to a mile away. So we're talking a long distance. And what the crown fires, you know, consistently do just that, is they throw embers, you know, far away, start another fire, you know, start another surface or ground fire, and then work their way up to another crown fire. Then you have 2 big incidents going at once. So the spot fire, obviously those are the ones, you know, that are caused by the embers that are carried by the wind, and, you know, they start, you know, the next fire going, which, you know, basically those fires burn into one large fire. So and then you can go to the next slide. This is an example of fuel behavior and types of fuel. If you look at the grassland, those and the pine and juniper eucalyptus, those burn really, really fast. And the grassland fire is more easily to manage. When you get into the, you know, the pine and the juniper and the eucalyptus, especially in the eucalyptus tree, when it gets up to the crown fire, those burn extremely hot and fast. So the slower fires, or the woodland, as you can see in the picture on the left, those are dense areas that are, you know, a little bit harder to ignite, but once they get ignited, they burn pretty hot. So same thing with the brush. The brush can carry, both of those, the woodlands and the brush, can carry embers, and actually all of them could carry embers, if you want to look at it that way, far away, and ignite and start another fire. So the pine and junipers, I didn't cover this, but I just looked at my notes. The thing about those we'll cover in the next couple of slides is those are classified as a ladder fuel, so they kind of climb up the tree, and you know, they start at the bottom, ignite the bark, and then, you know, jump to the ground. So you know, basically what we're kind of going over are things that can be prevented, and that's what this project is about. Is taking away some of the fuel and allowing, you know, allowing everybody to be a lot safer and help us out to maintain the environment and prevent, you know, catastrophic fires. So next slide. Oh, actually, that's you. Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks, Don. So the next piece of the triangle that we want to talk about is topography. And one key thing to really remember is that fire burns faster and more intense moving uphill. And a lot of that has to do with airflow. Naturally, air is normally going to want to be drawn up canyon and up slope. And then you add on top of that the fact that hot air rises faster. So you've got the hot air from the fire that's moving up slope. And then if you think of if my hand or my arm is the slope and I've got fire down here, this fire is actually closer to the fuel up slope, and it preheats that slope and it gets hotter faster. And even without a wind behind it, a fuel or a fire is going to burn much faster going up slope. You add to that a very intense wind, and then that's when you start running into very fast, rapid fire spread. And if you think of, firefighters trying to attack a fire like that, like you see in this picture right here, just think about some of the concerns and considerations that they need to take place, or that they need to think of when they're attacking this fire. Not only to put the fire out, but to do it with their safety in mind also. Let's also take a look at that fire situation right there. And you look at the homes up above. If you have thick brush that runs right up to the homes above it without a break, then that's when we start having some bad, potentially bad situations, and where we have serious chances of losing homes. Next slide, please. So these are just a couple examples of some of the habitats or the environment that we have in one of our top priorities as far as the WUI goes, the wildland-urban interface. First of all, we all love, the beauty of nature. We like the fact that we can live amongst the trees and the wildlife, and that comes with a little bit of risk if we're not careful about the environment around us and managing our fuels. So the wildland-urban interface gives us some challenges that we need to worry about, and some things that we can do to help ourselves be safer in these situations. So if you look at these pictures, these are all from around the Ward Creek area, and you can see some of the different fuel types. You can see the steep slopes, and you can see the houses packed within those fuels. So thinking about what we've already talked about, look at these homes, look at the fuels, look at where they are on the slopes, and start picturing in your mind, how at risk are those homes? Next slide, please. So this is just a map of the Ward Creek area. It's actually 1,200 square miles of wildland-urban interface for us. If you see it, like within those orange lines, we've got the creek. And of course, what does the creek do? The creek gives water that will feed all the trees and the brush and the grasses, and what allows for the woodlands to thrive there, which is part of the reason that we love that area. But if we let it go unchecked in the areas where we choose to build our homes, that's when we start to run into problems, and we need to start thinking of ways that we can maintain a balance between our habitat and our safety, and then the wildland that we love and the animals and plant species that live in those habitats. So this just gives you kind of an idea of where the canyon is and where we have been concerned with doing a lot of this type of fuel management work. And when we talk about fuel management, we talk about thinning the fuels and managing the amount of combustible materials around homes and neighborhoods. Next slide, please. So this is just a picture of from a fire that occurred in Santa Barbara. But it's in there because just to show you the wind that's there, and that this firefighter I read the article about it, and this firefighter was having not only a hard time because of the steep slope, but because of the wind pushing up against him while he was trying to move that hose line. So the wind, heavy winds is really not our friend when it comes to fires. Dry hot, typically in that picture of the canyon that I showed you earlier, we're going to have fires that are going to be blowing from the south. They're going to be our southwest winds are going to blow up the canyon. And that's our typical weather pattern. But every year, there are times throughout the year where that wind will shift. And sometimes it will shift, you know, in the middle of a day. Even like on times, that's one of the things that we're taught as firefighters to watch out for is changes in the wind direction. Because you can think the fire is moving one way and you're safe down below it. But if the wind changes, and in our War Canyon, it can change and blow from the northeast, those are usually really fast, hot, dry winds that are blowing, and that will then blow the fire down the canyon back in towards Mission Boulevard. So just some things that we need to keep an eye on as firefighters, and things that you need to keep track of down the road when we start talking about planning your escape, and things to think about if there is a fire and you are evacuating, which route you end up taking. All right, we can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. All right, so what is defensible space? Defensible space is a way of, if you think about removing the fuel, remember Don talked about the fire triangle, and that you need fuel, oxygen, and heat, sorry, to make a fire go. And if you take any one of those away, the fire goes away. So what can we do in this setting here to help protect our homes? We can take the fuel away. And what we're trying to do is remove the fuel from the path of a fire that may be approaching either uphill, downhill, or wherever from your home. If you look at some of the things, like some of the big firestorms that we've had in recent history, it's not always going to be a fire that's, you know, coming from trees right next to you. You know, we've lost suburban neighborhoods because they were so close together and people weren't ready and didn't do defensible space, right? And embers from wildland fires were blown. And as Captain Don said, embers can blow as far as a mile away. And if they land in some place that has just the right characteristics, it can actually start a new fire. And that's how we ended up with the firestorms that we had. So what are we trying to do when we do defensible space? We want to reduce the risk of igniting our home in the first place. And then if it does ignite, we want to be able to reduce the fire intensity. And we want to make a safe zone for our firefighters to be able to come in and operate to put the fire out that is approaching your home. Or if an ember does get on your home, we'll have the ability to get there quickly, hit it fast, and then as the fire blows by, we go down to the next house. So one of the big things we want to do is help structures resist ignition by reducing the fuel and the fire intensity around it. Next slide, please. So I think there are probably a number of you who have been through these discussions with us before. And if you have, we're glad that you are with us, because these are always the kind of things that are good to remember, remind, and refresh as we take a look at our home for the approaching wildland season and get ready to do the work that we need to be doing to make our homes defensible. So let's take a look at this right here. Next slide, please. Where we need to go back to the one that had the zones. So 2 back. There we go. So we've got some zones around our home. And if we live in the wildland urban interface, these are some of the things that we want to really take a look at. It doesn't say it on here, but from 0 to 6 feet, we want to try and make it if we start at your house as being 0 and work out 6 feet, you want to really try and remove all combustibles from around that home. So that, let's imagine if you had a wood pile next to your home, or you had a juniper bush that's right next or underneath a window, and an ember blows onto that juniper bush, and ignites that juniper bush, and that fire is going to reach up, and then the indirect heat can go right through, the radiant heat can go right through that window, catch a curtain on fire, and catch a home on fire, right? Just like that. That's how it can happen. So you want to start from 0 to 6, remove things like wood piles, flammable vegetation. If you do have decorative vegetation around your homes, keep them down low, and try to pick vegetation that is fire resistant. And that's something that we're going to talk about in our next class, or next discussion that we have in a couple weeks. So then you move out from that 0 to 6 zone, and you go to the 30-foot zone. And from there, you want to make sure that you remove all dead plants, grass, and weeds and vegetation from around. This is where you want to keep it mowed really close. This is the area where you're probably watering your lawn and you've got some green grass, and trying to keep things nice and green and alive. You want to remove dead leaves, pine needles, and all that kind of stuff from the gutter of your home and from the roof. You don't want to let those accumulate, because loose pine needles on your roof are going to be very prone to igniting with an ember that gets onto them. You want to make sure that you have your trees spaced 10 feet apart. You don't want to have branches overhanging onto and over your roof and in contact with your roof. You want to definitely make sure that it's 10 feet away from any, your chimney is 10 feet away from any branches, from trees, especially dead trees. In this 30-foot zone and even the 100-foot zone, you want to limb all of your trees up to where the lowest limb is at least 6 feet high. And you don't want any grass or brush directly underneath it. And as you can see throughout there on this diagram, you don't have a whole bunch of trees that are close together, clumped up within your 30 feet and your 100-foot zones. And what this does is it will allow that if one tree does catch on fire, you reduce the risk of it spreading to another tree, and another tree, and then to your home. So that's the goal. Is you want to, when you think of defensible space around your property, you want to think of space between fuels, so that if one piece of fuel does start to burn, it stays there and doesn't move from fuel to fuel to fuel, and you don't have fuel continuity from the grass to a bush to a tree to your home. All right, we can go to the next slide. So protect your home first. We've already talked about that, and I actually talked a little bit about it, but we'll take a look at some of these pictures right here. So you can see you've got the juniper bushes right there in the front, and then right just a short bit away, if you look up that walkway and that brick, you've got some more plants right there in that walkway that go into that open, that overhang there, right? So it's almost like having a potential fuel ladder going right into a covered walkway in the house. And if you think of heat rising and embers rising, that's a direct path right there to that overhang in that house, which is a direct path to the home. You've also got high weeds around the side of the house that you can see. And if you look on the back side, you can tell that those trees, branches are really close to the roof line of the house. And there's a good chance that there may be, brush, and you can see the grass is fairly high as you get a little bit higher up the slope. Now, let's think of another consideration, right? We're working from the house and we're working out. Obviously, one of the things that we're working on is we're trying to protect our own home when we're doing this defensible space. But let's also think in terms of, if you're doing a barbecue in that particular backyard and you've got trees and bushes and stuff right up next to your backyard, and you somehow, a fire starts and it gets into those trees and bushes, in this scenario right here, that fire could run up the hill and there are homes up on the other side of the hill. So another part of this consideration is we're trying to build fire-safe neighborhoods and communities. where we can work together with each other and in a method of community, working together and helping each other out, getting to a point where our whole community can be safe rather than just worrying about our home too. All right, we can go to the next slide. So in this picture, what we're looking at here is just another example of the spacing that we can use for the brush that we're working on. And I kind of like this picture because it reminds us that you want to have 10 feet between trees. And because if you want to have bushes next to each other, you want to have, if the bush is 3 feet tall, if you look on the left-hand side of that yellow rectangle, if that bush was 3 feet tall, we want to have 6 feet between the next bush, right? So if you look at the picture behind us, I like to look in, you see that red maple, and just below it, you've got a piece of bush of coyote brush is what I call it. I don't know the actual name of it, but when I was working for CAL FIRE, we called that coyote brush. And then a good distance away, you've got that other bush, and then a good distance away to the right, you've got that other bush. That's kind of how we want it to be interspersed as we get closer within that 100-foot zone of our home. That does a couple things. We still have, you know, the decorative, you know, trees and bushes within the landscape, part of what we love about it. It's 100 feet away from the house. And we still have cover for wildlife to be able to hide, get some shade, and all that kind of stuff. So that's a good example there of, you know, kind of how those bushes are spaced out behind that home. And if you also look, that grass is cut down pretty low. So just an example all around of some ideas of how we want to, examples of how we want to maintain that 100-foot and 30-foot zone. Next slide, please. These are just some of the ways that we have used and still use to reduce the fuel load in different areas of Hayward. We've got manual removal from hand crews. If you look and see here, they've made sure that the limbs are all up high enough so that the fire, if fire did come in the grass or if there was a bush underneath, it would not easily spread to the branches above, and then that reduces our chances of having what we call the crown fire. So they've removed all the dead, dying duff and leaves, and in this case, it's a little grove of eucalyptus. So they've taken all the bark that's stripped off the eucalyptus trees, and they're cleaning that up, and they're going to either remove it, or oftentimes what we will do is we will have them chip it, which is what we see in the middle picture. And that's another really big important part of this grant and what we're doing with the grant money and our partnership with you, our community in the Hayward and Fairview Hills, is when we ask you to do your maintenance and your fuel reductions on your property, we realize that it's kind of a pain sometimes to get rid of that. What do I do with it? Well, we have a program that you can access through our website to where we will can register you to do your brush work, bring your brush work out to the street on a predetermined day, and then a company will come through that we contract, and they will take that and they will chip the wood for you. And you'll have a choice of one of two things. You can either keep the chips on your property, they'll keep it so you can use it as mulch on your property, or they will take the chips away. And then the last thing that we've been using recently in different areas is we use goats to come in and do some clearing of vegetation and helping to reduce the fuel load in areas that have really not had any kind of work done in a while. They come through and they really help us kind of get a foothold in some of these areas that haven't been gone through for a while. Next slide, please. All right, so keep the fire out of trees. If you think back to the slide that Captain Nicholson had shown you that talked about the ground fire, the surface fire, the brush fire, and then the crown fire. You might have remembered seeing that blue label there that said the best underneath surface fires. Well, and you might have wondered, well, what the heck? Why is that? Well, as firefighters, we look at the best is the fire that never happens, but then the next best is the fire that is easier for us to put out. So if you have fuels like grass, it's a light, flashy fuel. It will ignite quickly, it will burn fast, but it will not produce a whole lot of embers, and it will not produce extremely high flame lengths, and it doesn't have quite as much heat as brush and obviously trees will have. So that's why that was the best. So if you think back to the picture I had just a couple slides ago where I had the 2 bushes and then the 2 trees, and the reason we want to space it out, now imagine I had grass that was, 2 feet tall that ran right up to a bush, and that bush just happened to be sitting underneath a pine tree with limbs that were down to 3 feet, and we've got a 4-foot tall bush, and then right next to that pine tree is somebody's home. And so that gives us what we call a ladder fuel situation, or a fuel ladder situation. And that's what our little picture in the middle is, our little bad guys running up the ladder, just like it would happen if a fire got into the grass and had a straight path up to the treetops and to a home. Now, what you have when it gets into the trees is you have a large volume of fuels concentrated in one area, but if it's next to another tree, you got that much more fuel that is exposed. You add wind to that, and you've got big chunks of embers that can be blown off and spread that fire much more rapidly than it ever would if it was just a grass fire. It is much easier for fire crews to come in and put out a grass fire quickly and safely than it is to put out a fire that is raging in the treetops. All right, so next slide, please.
I think that's me.
And now we're going to go back to Captain Nicholson.
Okay, so by now you realize that embers are really bad, right? So embers can move ahead of the fire and start new fires. So what is the most vulnerable places of your home, or vulnerable places of your home that you can manage and keep that risk down and control? So if you look at the slide, there's different areas. Some of those, they're all of concern, but some of them are projects that you would actually have to make a decent investment in, and hopefully you're already fire safe. But we're going to go over it and discuss how you could become even more safe from wildfire. So obviously the roof is the largest area, and that's the most vulnerable. If you look at the little fires there, number 3, an area where the roof meets, like I say, a dormer or another structure, or not a structure, but another section of roof, yeah. That can be a place where pine needles or leaves accumulate. And when that happens, think of where an ember is going to land and stay. That would be right there where that combustible material is, and could cause the fire. So the wood siding of the home, or going back to the roof, obviously you'd want to build something that is non-combustible, for roofing material, instead of like wood shake would be extremely bad. So the other thing is the gutters around your house. That's another place for pine needles and leaves to accumulate. So what we would suggest is getting a gutter guard that is non-combustible and will prevent the accumulation of leaves and combustible materials. The other thing is, your fireplace, you don't want to start the fire yourself. Make sure you have a mesh screen on that that will not allow embers to fly out, but also on the other hand, not to allow embers to fly in. So also what we suggest is to close the flue. Sorry, I had a loss for words there. Close the flue during fire season when the fireplace is not in use, so that those embers, if they actually did come down the chimney, they would probably just, go out on their own. So the other thing is like, your vehicles, don't leave the windows down where embers can fly in, and it's obviously more susceptible to catch fire if an ember lands on your car seat versus, on top of the car roof or the hood or something like that. So other combustible materials around the house, just looking at this picture, a wood seat, Adirondack chair, or whatever you want to call it there. And then, as Chief Ulmer was talking about defensible space and, and the zones, planting non-combustible or fire retardant plants and vegetation around your house, so that those don't catch on fire. The other thing is, close your top to your lid to the green waste, so that embers can't fly in there, cause a fire, and then that fire travels up the house onto the roof, and pretty soon your house is on fire. So we want that to, never happen, obviously. Stacking combustible material like wood for the fireplace next to your home is a bad choice. You want to move that out away from the house, so that limits your chances of that causing a fire. So the other thing is fencing. If you think about the fencing around your house, we respond to a lot of fires where it's the fence is involved. Obviously, it's a combustible material. Using non-combustible wood or material around at least to the 6 foot mark of your fence line would be, beneficial to, so that if the fence fire does happen, it's not going to travel all along the fence, and then, where it lets up to your house, that's going to, cause a fire. The other thing is the window choice. Obviously, the radiant heat from, say if it's another house, that your neighbor's house is on fire, that radiant heat can travel, break the window, and then, cause the interior contents of your house to catch on fire. So the tempered glass tends to work better as far as, it won't break as quickly as regular glass. So getting a dual pane window would be more beneficial than, just a single pane window. Let's see, how about decks? Decks is another place where fires tend to happen. And what people do sometimes is put combustible materials underneath the deck. Embers can fly in, go underneath the deck, cause, how we talked about the fuels, cause, grasses or pine needles or leaves to catch on fire. Then it ladders up to the deck, and then, travels onto the house. So make sure you create an ember resistant zone around all your decking. Walls, the best choice there would be fire resistant materials such as like stucco instead of wood siding. Let's see. Oh, if you have overhangs like eaves, enclose those so that there's not exposed lumber to catch on fire. And vents, that's a huge one. So vents, traveling embers can reach inside your attic space through vents. So the recommended metal mesh vents they should be no more, they should be 1/4 inch to or 1/16 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch spacing. So that it's harder for the embers to fly in and penetrate the attic space and cause fire. And then talking about the attics, There's also, it's a good choice to make sure next to those vents that you're not stacking it or storing, cardboard boxes and things like that that can catch on fire, rather easily. So next slide. This kind of talks about the same thing. This is the avenues that embers have, gotten penetrated and caused fires. So if you look at the rooftop, there's some building material up there that have caught on fire, even though that's a clay roof or what kind of tile roof. The windows there, obviously they can break because of radiant heat or direct flame impingement. So, the tempered glass works better there. So this is an idea from the next picture down, the very bottom, says from down under. Storing anything that's combustible under a deck or under stairs is a bad idea because, we had talked about the ladder fuels. That's exactly what this is in a different environment. So it's not, caused by bushes and wild or natural things. It's caused by stacking combustible material, like boxes and stuff underneath a deck. And if that catches on fire, then the deck is on fire because heat travels up and causes the ladder fuel thing that we talked about. The utility closet, that is, you can see that's some type of material, siding material that if there's like a void space in that material, fire can find its way into pretty much, anything that is not covered up. So, the next picture it talks about vents. That is a picture of a vent that would not be approved or not be suggested. Like I said, they need to be smaller in space so that they still create airflow, which is what the vents are designed to do, but it limits the embers from flying in there and causing a fire in your attic. So we want to prevent fire from getting inside your home and around your home as well. So these are little things that that you can consider. But the biggest thing is housekeeping. As far as getting the if you have a tree that is littering pine needles or leaves or something onto your rooftop, make sure especially before fire season, make sure you get those off the roof and just it doesn't take much to make your house and your community a lot safer. So next slide. I think that's back to you.
All right, thank you, Cap. All right, so before we move on to this next topic, I cannot stress enough the importance of some simple things like that. I've seen fires or been on fires where we've firefighters have had to cut and try to take a chainsaw and cut the deck away from a home that caught on fire because there were flammables underneath it. Whereas the firefighters would pull the flammables out underneath, cut the deck away with the chainsaw and pull it off in an effort to try and save the home. Not the safest of situations for firefighters to be in. And if the fire when they get there is too far along, then that house could be lost because of that material underneath the deck. And then just get either, if not yourself, maybe getting somebody else to get up into your attic and put that screen on the other side of your vents will help keep those embers out and give your home the fighting chance that it deserves. Now I'm going to talk a little bit here about just some of our past projects and just kind of go through and let you see kind of what we've done in the past and as a lead up into what our project is going to be this year. So you can see on the Ward Creek Trail, we went through on the left-hand side and pulled all this dead brush that was off the side of the trail, overhanging, and we really opened it up. You can see a lot more sunlight coming through that picture on the right, and that gives us a better chance. What this would work for is if there are homes uphill, it acts as a potential natural fire break, and it gives firefighting crews an area where we could bring equipment or firefighters through and improve upon this and make it an even better fire break. So it gives us a head start on that type of work. Next slide, please. So here, just another really good example of, same location before and after the work. We still have vegetation there. We still have the ability to give some kind of habitat for wildlife, and it doesn't look, completely barren. At the same time, the dead limbs have been limbed up, and when we don't have the ladder fuel situation leading up to the homes. Next slide, please. Again, just more example of, if you look at the trees on the right-hand side past the stop sign there, look how low those limbs are and how close they are to the grass. And then you look at the picture on the right, look how high those have been limbed up and they've been thinned out, and they look better, they look much more maintained, they still provide habitat for wildlife, and they are now much more fire safe. Next slide, please. And just once again, just another picture of what we had. I mean, the big thing that sticks out to me is, the grasses are down. We could even afford to have a little bush right here in the front corner if we wanted to, right? If this was our property, we could leave another bush that's there, some kind of decorative plant. But the big thing that sticks out to me there is the dead pine tree right next to the power lines, right? That's a huge improvement on safety here. And then once again, if you think about it, these are some major thoroughfares here, and these are the ways that not only are you going to be getting out of your neighborhoods, but at the same time, our fire crews are going to be driving up those roads to get to the fire, right? So we need to try and keep these exit routes as clear as we can. And it's not just a matter of fire being on the road or going across the road, but the amount of smoke that's there and blocking vision. Next slide, please. Oh, we have one question there, Shanley, if we want to, that I'm noticing down there in the Q&A, if we can look at that. Yes. Okay, regarding putting screens on one's vent, does that need to be done from the inside or outside? So you could do it either way, right? So if you want to have a decorative screen on the outside, you can remove the screen and you can put remove the decorative vent covering, put the screening there, and then put the covering back over, making sure that you don't leave any gaps for sparks to get in. The other thing, if you're not worried about the aesthetics, then you can put the screen from the outside and just make sure it's all buttoned up and you don't have any access for the sparks. And then the other way you can do it is you can go in through the attic and you can put it up in that way. So you got a couple different ways that you can do it. I hope that answered your question. Okay, so next slide, please. All right, so this is the site that we chose to do the work this year. If you look down on the bottom, you can see the tennis courts to the bottom left-hand corner. There's the bottom of Ward Creek right there, right at Plunge Park. There's a trail that goes right up through along next to there. We've got a lot of foot traffic through there and evidence sometimes of camps that are there. And so when you have people and foot traffic, sometimes that equates to possible fire starts. Not all the time, but it just, that's just part of reality. So you look up that hill and then you look at the thick, dense vegetation that's already started right there at the bottom. And then on the right-hand side of this picture, look at the dense housing that's right there and that runs right up to those homes. And what you see is Marie Drive and Leona Drive, and those are both off of Highland, which is a major way that many people are going to have to evacuate, and we're going to have to go in, just like I talked about, access and egress routes. And a fire down on this end of the creek and the drainage could, if the wind is blowing the way we typically would see it, could blow right into those homes. And then some of those homes and those embers could blow on to the next and to the next and just continue to burn up the canyon and across the neighborhoods. So what we've decided to do is take and work from the end of Marie and Leona and work back. And what our goal is going to be is to get the 30 and 100-foot clearance in these homes. We're going to thin some of these trees. We're going to make sure we don't have branches that are going right up to over these homes, and we're going to limb them up to 6 feet, and we're not going to have ladder fuels, and we're going to go ahead and get rid of all the grasses and weeds that are there. If you go to the next slide, it'll show you some of the conditions. I had the opportunity to go out and walk it the other day, and you can see how right there on the left, that's the end of, I believe that was Marie, and the trees go right up to the property line there from Plunge Park or from that Ward Creek Trail. So we would be working to thin that and bring it back. And if you look below, look at the amount of dead slash that's down there. And then again, over to the right, we've got a little more of the same situation where we've got brush coming right up. We've got low branches and grass that is looking okay right now. But now that it's spring, we've had a couple weeks of spring, that grass is continuing to grow, and it is going to eventually dry out and will be right up underneath those trees. So those are some examples right there of things that you can take away from this when you're looking at designing your plan for defensible space around your property. And that's kind of the goal. So what we're going to do at some point is we're going to take some more pictures. We'll see if maybe we can get some drone footage or something along those lines, and we'll do some before shots, and then we'll do some after shots of it, the whole deal. And we'll be using this as not only a fuel management project, but a project and a tool that we can share with the community to just act as a demonstration on some good ideas for defensible space on their properties. And I see we have 2 questions. Answer the question. All right. Thank you, Dale. I'm glad that I did. And then if we have questions, is there someone that we can talk to? Yeah, Stephen, there are some ways that if you want to get a hold of our office, I mean, obviously we have limited resources, but there are ways that if you have a question, you can call our fire office line, and we can, those questions can be passed on to me or other people working in fire prevention. And then you can also ask the questions on that website that we gave you at the early part of this program. It was FireSafe HFD at hayward-ca.gov. And depending on how busy we are and how things are going, we do definitely, I mean, there are times where we can maybe even make a trip out to your property if you've got, you know, some questions that we can't answer over the phone, and we can give you some one-on-one help with that. So hopefully that answers your question there, sir. Is that the last one? Is that the one from? Yep. All right. So we can go to the next slide, please. So our project timeline, like I said, this is off of a FEMA grant. We've had to submit a timeline of what we are planning on doing and when we're planning on doing it. Right now, you'll see today we're doing this first workshop for defensible space. The next presentation, so since we're doing the pandemic, normally for those of you who have been to one of these presentations before, we would go to community locations, like we would get a school gymnasium that we would rent or book for the night, and we would do this presentation in a live forum. Well, and we would go to different neighborhoods to do that. Now we can't do that, obviously, but what we can do, we were thinking, how can we make this to where, I mean, everybody could show up to the first one, and then we're not going to have anybody for the other communication pieces that we need to do to meet the qualifications for our grant. So what we decided to do was, let's talk about some other topics that we don't normally talk about. So one of the ones that I'm really excited about is the one we're going to be doing on April 19th. Wildlife habitat preservation while we're doing our defensible space. This is an important thing. I actually went to school to study biology, and this is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. Actually, Thursday, I'm going to be doing a walkthrough and assessment of the site location with a wildlife biologist, and we're going to be looking for signs of any protected species, and that includes plants and wildlife. And they're going to help guide us in coming up with a program that we can provide to you next class about how you can maintain fire safety for your home while still creating good, safe habitat for the wildlife that, I mean, let's face it, I think that's why we all love the wildland-urban interface, right? It makes us feel good to share our homes with the wildlife that's out there. So this is kind of a neat piece that I'm really looking forward to. And then the next one is a very important topic, talking about evacuation routes and how to be prepared for evacuation in case of a wildfire. I know that I don't think there's probably anybody on this call right now or watching this webinar who hasn't seen the footage from the firestorms that have been happening throughout California and just basically right in our backyard with some of our neighbors. And so this is a very timely and important topic. We'll be talking about evacuation, and we'll be talking about a new program that we have called Zone Haven, and where we've created escape zones or evacuation zones throughout the city of Hayward, so that when it comes time to call for an evacuation, we have pieces in place that will make it very quick and very efficient and easy for us to do. June 14th, we're going to have an overview of the project. We're going to talk about some of the things that we've done. We're going to talk about the work that's going on at the site. July, we'll be done with the work at the site, and we'll have the video available for you all to see and watch, and we'll be able to give a presentation on what we've been able to accomplish. And then in August, we're doing the community participation portion of it, and that's going to include throughout all of this, the chipping program and all that kind of stuff. So we can go to the next slide, Shanley, as I'm going to the questions. Okay, still have the questions. And then, okay, from Dana, are there any local companies that offer home hardening services? And I don't know if my windows are tempered glass or not. Is there a way to find out? That is something that we will have to do some research on for you as far as the tempered glass.
I think it's usually labeled at the very bottom corner, from my experience, but that might not be the case with your windows. There's like a little black stamp that says tempered. The inside or outside, at least, have one tempered glass section would be better than none.
I would believe that most new windows, if you replaced your windows recently, they're each year, how things go as time goes on, new products, they usually try to build more safety in. We can do some more research on that and list that on our website as we were talking about. the FireSafe HFD at hayward-california.org or ca.org. And then as far as local companies that offer home hardening services, we can't really, even if we knew of companies, we can't really advertise companies. But I would say that if you look around, wildfire safety and defensible space is such a big safety issue going on in California now that I would be surprised if there weren't companies that could do that. And then the other thing is you could probably find a contractor or a local handy person service that can come out and work with you to design some fire safety efforts around your home. So just work with them, work with the resources that you can find on our website that talk about the size of the mesh that you can use and that kind of stuff. And you can come up with a plan with them. And if you need help coming up with those resources, you have our website. All right, thank you for all those great questions, everybody. Kind of in closing, this is just kind of a reminder of where we are and what we've gone over. Protect the area around your home with defensible space. And that includes protecting your home, like we had these last questions that were about. Those are very important aspects of it. Start at your home, 0 to 6, 30, and 100 feet. Those are the areas of defensible space that are really going to make an impact when and if a wildfire is approaching. Spacing, the fuel load, and the maintenance, dead to live ratio are more important than the species, all right? So remember that picture, what I mean by this is remember that picture I showed in the past projects that we've done, and we showed those eucalyptus trees that got limbed up and how like airy they were, and there were no branches down to the ground like there were before. Those trees are no more dangerous at that point than, you know, a pine tree or an oak tree at that point, because they've been made to be as fire safe as we can make them by limbing them up, thinning them out, and making sure that we didn't have grass or bushes underneath them. So that's what that means, is space it not only horizontally, but vertically, so you don't have lighter fuels going on. And that is going to be more important. But when we get to my topic that we're doing on the 19th, we're going to talk a little bit about some native species that you can plant around your home that are going to be potentially more drought resistant and more fire retardant and fire safe, and can help support local wildlife or native wildlife. Never forget that fuel is fuel, though, whether it's homes, plants, furniture, cars, whatever you've got around your house. So it's all the same. Kind of keep things spaced out. And I know that part of it, you're going to think, Don, was saying, oh, don't have your wood chair on your porch and that kind of stuff. You can have it on your porch normally, right? But if it gets to be fire season and there's a fire coming or it's a red flag day, maybe take those items that you normally leave on your porch when we have a real risk of fires, and now we're going to want to move them to a safer location where it's not within our 30-foot zone, right? So there's some ideas and some things that we can do to still, live the good life without, having to be total Spartan about it, and at the same time be safe. And then the last thing is just don't be the cause of a wildfire. Listen to the weather reports. When it's a red flag day, don't, do things like light up your grill, when the windstorm is blowing through, because those embers are going to go. Don't do your yard work. Do your yard work and fuel management before a red flag day, because if your lawnmower blade hits a rock and causes a spark on those dry weeds and you light off a fire, not good, right? So try and take care of it before we get to that point. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is, a lot of times we run into properties where they're big properties, and people haven't done maintenance on them for a while, and now we're realizing that, oh, this needs to be done, right? Get working on it, and it doesn't all have to be done like, in one fell swoop. If we start maintaining them year round and start doing a little bit here and a little bit there all year long, before you know it, you're going to have a fire safe property all the way around, right? There's an old proverb that I used to think was really pretty cool, is a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one single step. And, we could look at it here as, defensible space starts with, cutting one branch up and removing one dead tree, right? And we just keep working together as a community to make it happen and make ourselves wildland fire safe as we can be. So I believe that's it, Shanley. I don't know if there's another slide. There is one more slide. This is what we're trying to prevent. Right? And remember, 90% of all ignitions are caused by humans. And it's just a matter of be cautious when we're heading into these summer months, when it's hot and dry, and be really aware of the red flag days. And that's all I have for you tonight. I think that's all Captain Don has. Like I said, April 19th, I will be back to talk about the wildlife portion of this and how we can be wildfire safe while also providing for the habitat of the critters that we share this beautiful area with. So I thank you. If we have no more questions, that's great. I hope you all have a great night. And remember that you can still get a hold of us at any time, and we are here to help. And have a great night.
Good night.